Hi folks, today I'm going to present to you how to make your own miso using garbanzo beans. So what you need to do first of all is go buy some organic garbanzo beans. I bought these at Whole Foods. Each packet is 1 pound. It'd be best to get 3 packets total, and I'll explain what to do with that. So what you do is you take the garbanzo beans, put it into a container, the dried garbanzo beans, put it into a container. That's 1 packet, 2 packets, and then I put in just a little bit more, an additional 0.2 pounds. And the reason why I do that is I want to have a total of 2.2 pounds, which is the same as 1 kilogram. And the reason for that is because it makes the mathematics easier, because you have to calculate the amount of salt to add to the mixture as well. Okay, so I add that in, cover it, then let it sit for 24 hours so that the beans will, or of course you want to wash the beans first, dump out the dirty water, put in some fresh water, let it sit for 24 hours, and then the beans will expand. And you'll get something that looks like this. The beans will get quite a bit bigger. Okay? And then the next step is that you're going to take the beans and put them into a pressure cooker. And here I have something called an Instapot. So the Instapot has some settings on it. One of the settings is beans. So you put the beans into an Instapot, and what I like to do first is put in some seaweed. The type of seaweed that I use is dashi kombu. And the reason why I put the seaweed in there is because it supplies some additional flavor. I put that at the bottom of the pot. Additional flavor as well as minerals like iodine. And iodine is very important because most sea salt nowadays does not have any iodine in it, and iodine is very important for your health. So I put the seaweed at the bottom of the pot, add the beans, the soaked beans, put it in here, and you have to make sure you don't overfill it. There's a little line on the side that tells you what the maximum quantity is. And I'm not putting in all 2.2 pounds at this point. I'm only putting in half because I have a smaller crock pot, smaller pressure cooker. If you have a bigger pressure cooker, maybe you can fit it all in there. But in my case, I do this in 2 batches. So next step is to put the lid in place. Put the lid in place, and you want to press. There's a setting here called bean chili, so I press that. Okay, so I pound up the beans, and you end up with this mash. You know, drain the water and then pound them up. You might have to add a little bit of water to allow you to mash it. I'm using a pestle, which I bought at an Oriental food store. You could just as well use a piece of 2x4, and you just pound it up like so. So I'm going to take these beans here. You can also use a potato masher if you wish, another way to do it. I found that the mortar works better, a little more efficient. So I'm going to add the second batch of beans into here and also pound it. Adding it in, pound it all up. And while I'm doing that, before I forget, it's also important to hydrate the koji. You're using koji as a starter. The starter is meant to ferment the garbanzo beans. So I have 2 packets of this. Each packet weighs 200 grams. However, you should have a 1-to-1 weight of dry beans to koji. I've cut down a little bit in this case just to save some money, and I found that I get good fermentation in 3 to 6 months with garbanzo beans. They seem to ferment faster than soybeans. So I'm going to take these, I'm going to open up the packet. I took the packet and squeezed it first to break up the dry clumps. And now I'm going to take each packet and dump it in there. Grab the scissors here. Grab up the packets. And I've saved some of the bean water, and you need to let the bean water cool to room temperature so you don't kill the koji. So I'm going to dump the koji into the water here, and I'm going to stir it up so it mixes. That's what I'm doing right now, as you can see. And you want to make sure the koji has a chance to hydrate. Open up the second packet of koji. Put that in here. And let that mix that up. So I can need a little bit more of the water. So I'm going to let that hydrate while I pound the beans, because pounding the beans takes a little longer than it takes to hydrate the koji. And don't overdo it with the koji, just enough to hydrate it and you're good to go. You don't want it to be too soupy. Okay, looks good. So I'll continue pounding the beans now. So you can see. It's quite a workout, so if you like exercise, this is definitely a good way to get a good workout that day. Now you want to get you want to smash as much of the beans as you can. You may not be able to get every single bean, but that's okay. You can have some whole beans in your miso. It's not going to hurt anything. And you can see the koji is hydrating. It's absorbing the liquid. Keep pounding a little bit more. Pretty good. You can see the consistency here of the beans. Still a little bit on the dry side. Now we're going to add in the koji. Koji looks like it's pretty hydrated by now. Actually, we add a little bit more water to it. As far as the time it takes to hydrate, I would say 15 minutes, something like that, 10 to 15 minutes. You're going to see the rice grow in size as it absorbs the water. Okay, so then the other important point is that you need to add some salt. And typically I'm using 12% of the dry weight of the beans plus the koji. In my case, I'm using 1 kilogram of the dry garbanzo beans and 0.4 kilograms of the koji. If you want the fermentation to go faster, you can put in more koji. On some websites it says to use a 1-to-1 of the dry weight of the garbanzo beans to the dry weight of the koji. I'm using a little bit less because I found that with garbanzo beans they ferment faster than soybeans. So to save some money, I'm only using 0.4 kilograms by dry weight. So the calculation then that you need to do is 1.4 kilograms or 1,400 grams times 12%, and you're going to get, you know, the right grams of salt that you need to use. So I've got this scale here that I'm using. I set the weight to be grams, and I tear the plastic container first, and then I'm just using this ground Himalayan pink sea salt that I got from Costco, and you can spoon it out and put it in there. So next step is to put the salt in there. So I'm dumping it in. And you need to mix it, of course. And at the same time, I'm going to add in the koji. Looks like it's ready. Okay, so I've got everything in here, the salt, the koji, and the garbanzo beans. Just start mixing it. I use the pounder. Actually, the pounder seems to be a pretty good way to mix it all. You can kind of stir it or pound it as you wish. And the other thing that you should add as well is a little bit of starter from your last batch. So mix in a little more salt until I'm done with it. You should use a little bit of starter from your last batch, maybe a tablespoon or two. So I'm taking this miso from, this is not from my last batch, this is something I bought online, but you can do it either way. I just don't happen to have any miso at this point other than this store-bought. And so you put in your miso, about a tablespoon, and keep mixing it. Mixing and stirring. Don't forget to add in your salt. And you don't want this to be too soupy. You want it to be kind of like the consistency of, say, peanut butter. And you don't want it to be too dry either. Just to give you guys a rough idea here, I'll show what that looks like. Here's the consistency. It sticks to the mortar and pestle. That's what you want. You want to have that sort of consistency. So I'm going to be doing some stirring and pounding. Get everything mixed together. So the point is you want to get these mixed thoroughly before you put it into your pot. Here's my glass jar that I'm going to be putting this into in a second. Okay, I'd say that's pretty good. Before I put this into the glass jar, I'm just going to wash my hands a little bit. Just for sanitary reasons. Okay, now. I'm going to take this and dump it in. Ideally, what you want to do is form it into some little balls and then plop it into your glass container. Another ball. Plop it into your glass container towards the bottom. Keep doing that. The main point is you don't want to have, you want to try to avoid air bubbles. You may have to use your mortar in order to help you push that in thoroughly. Okay, so there we are. Next thing you need to do is get it nice and flat. And after I get it flat, I'm going to be putting a layer of salt on top. And the reason why I put the salt on there is just to protect it from bacteria and molds. Nice and flat. Okay, you'll notice that on the sides there's a little bit of the bean paste. You know, it's not a bad idea to take a little bit of alcohol and just kind of wipe along the sides. So rubbing alcohol and just kind of go around the rim on the inside to clean it up a little bit more. Okay. Now we take some sea salt, or Himalayan salt rather. Now we're going to put a little bit of that as a top coating. I don't know if you can see that from home. As far as exactly how much to put in there, totally up to you. But just as long as you make sure that it's well covered up. You might have to swish it around a little bit to get it to cover the entire area. Okay, so that's it. The only thing left is to put a cloth on top, a cheesecloth with a rubber band. And this will take about at least 3 months to ferment, and you'll be able to smell that it's getting that fermented smell to it, and it'll then 3 months, 6 months, probably better. It's better to go 6 months, but 3 months will work okay with garbanzo beans. If you're using soybeans, it's going to take a little longer, but I like garbanzo beans because they're a quicker ferment. Okay, and the last step is to put some cheesecloth over the top with a rubber band. So I bought this cheesecloth online, but you can use any kind of cloth basically, as long as it's clean. Wrap it with a rubber band, and then you want to put it away on your shelf someplace that's the temperature doesn't really matter. Just don't want to let it get too cold or too hot. So I'm going to put this in the storeroom and let it sit at least 3 months, and ideally you want to label it so you know when you put it in there.